The wind howled through the desolate canyon, carrying with it a chill that no blanket or fire could ever fully banish. It was late autumn in the Wild West, and the land had already begun to prepare itself for winter's cruel embrace. In this vast expanse of desert and rolling hills, there stood a solitary ranch, a testament to man's defiance against nature's relentless fury. The owner of this ranch, a grizzled man named Samuel Whitmore, had built his life upon these unforgiving plains. He was a hard-working rancher who prided himself on maintaining order amidst chaos. But lately, something strange had been happening. Samuel first noticed it one morning after a particularly moonless night. As dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, he rode out to inspect his cattle fences as part of his daily routine. To his astonishment, he found sections of his fence cut cleanly, as if someone had used a sharp blade. Yet, there were no tracks, no signs of intrusion, just the eerie silence of the desert surrounding him. Confused and troubled, Samuel dismounted from his horse and examined the damage more closely. His heart sank when he realized that this wasn't an isolated incident. It was deliberate, calculated, even. But who would do such a thing? And why? Little did Samuel know at the time, this discovery marked only the beginning of a mystery that would haunt him for weeks to come. Each time the moon disappeared from the night sky, leaving the world cloaked in darkness, the same pattern repeated itself. His fences would be mysteriously cut again. At first, Samuel thought it might be the work of rival ranchers trying to sabotage his livelihood. Perhaps they sought revenge for some past disagreement, or simply wanted to drive him off his land. But as days turned into weeks, doubts began to creep into his mind. If it were another rancher, wouldn't they leave behind evidence, tracks, footprints, discarded tools? Instead, all he found was pristine sand and untouched earth. One evening, as the sun dipped below the jagged peaks of the distant mountains, Samuel sat by the warmth of his campfire, lost in thought. The flames danced erratically, casting flickering shadows across his weathered face. Beside him lay his rifle, a constant companion during these troubling times. He stared into the fire, its glow illuminating the worry lines etched deep into his forehead. "What is going on?" he muttered under his breath, his voice barely audible over the crackling wood. The question echoed in his mind like a riddle, without an answer. As the nights grew colder, so too did Samuel's determination to uncover the truth. He decided to take matters into his own hands, refusing to let whoever, or whatever, was responsible get away with their deeds. With each passing day, his resolve hardened, fueled by anger and frustration. Yet, despite his efforts, every investigation led to dead ends. No witnesses came forward, no clues presented themselves. It was as if the culprit vanished into thin air once the sun rose. But then one fateful night, everything changed. The air was heavy with anticipation as Samuel prepared himself for what he hoped would be the final confrontation. Tonight, the moon hung low in the sky, its light obscured by thick clouds rolling in from the west. Perfect conditions for whatever force was cutting his fences to strike again. Armed with his trusty rifle and lantern, Samuel mounted his steed and set off toward the perimeter of his property. The journey was long and arduous, the path lined with cacti and mesquite bushes that seemed to whisper secrets to one another in the dark. As he approached the area where the previous cuts had occurred, Samuel slowed his horse, scanning the landscape carefully. The ground stretched out before him, flat and barren, save for the occasional tumbleweed rolling lazily in the breeze. Suddenly, a sound caught his attention, a soft rustling, almost imperceptible, coming from the direction of the fence line. Gripping his rifle tightly, Samuel urged his horse forward, his senses heightened with alertness. When he arrived at the source of the noise, what he saw left him speechless. There, standing near the fence, was a figure shrouded in shadow, their form indistinct yet unmistakably human. They wore a long coat that billowed in the wind, obscuring much of their appearance. In their hand was a knife, glinting faintly in the dim light. Without hesitation, Samuel raised his rifle, aiming directly at the intruder. "Stop right there," he shouted, his voice firm and commanding. "I've had enough of your games." The figure froze, their silhouette framed against a backdrop of the endless desert. For a moment, Neither moved nor spoke, the tension between them palpable. Then, slowly, the stranger turned to face Samuel, revealing a face both familiar and unsettling. It was a woman, her features softened by age but still strikingly beautiful. Her eyes, however, held a depth of sorrow and pain that made Samuel lower his weapon instinctively. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You don't understand." Samuel's anger faltered, replaced momentarily by confusion. "Understand what?" he demanded, though his tone had softened slightly. "Why are you cutting my fences? What do you want?" The woman sighed deeply, lowering her head as if burdened by some great weight. "It's not about your fences," she replied quietly. "It's about survival." Before Samuel could press further, the woman explained her story. She introduced herself as Eleanor, a widow whose family had once owned a small farm nearby. Years ago, during a severe drought, their crops had failed, forcing them to sell their land to make ends meet. Since then, Eleanor had lived a nomadic life, moving from place to place, struggling to provide for herself and her young daughter. Recently, she had discovered a hidden spring located deep within Samuel's property, a lifeline in the harsh desert environment. Desperate to ensure her child's safety, Eleanor had resorted to cutting the fence under cover of darkness, allowing access to the precious water source. Samuel listened intently, his initial rage giving way to empathy. He understood the desperation that drove people to desperate measures, having faced similar challenges himself throughout his years as a rancher. Still, he couldn't ignore the fact that her actions endangered his livestock and livelihood. "There has to be another way," he said gently. "We can find a solution together." Eleanor nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you," she murmured, her gratitude evident. "I never meant to cause harm. I only want to protect my daughter." In that moment, a bond formed between the two of them, forged in the crucible of hardship and understanding. Together, they devised a plan to share the resources of the land fairly, ensuring both parties could thrive without conflict. Over time, Eleanor and her daughter became regular visitors to Samuel's ranch, helping with chores and contributing to the community spirit that defined life in the Wild West. Yet, even as peace settled over the region, Samuel couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than met the eye. Little did he know, the true mastermind behind the fence cutting had yet to reveal itself, and when it finally did, it would turn his world upside down. Weeks passed, and the arrangement between Samuel and Eleanor flourished. The ranch prospered, and the once tense atmosphere gave way to camaraderie and cooperation. However, one stormy night, as lightning illuminated the sky and thunder roared like a beast awakened from slumber, Samuel stumbled upon a shocking revelation. While checking on the cattle during the storm, he noticed something unusual near the old barn, a pile of bones buried beneath a layer of dirt. Curious and disturbed, Samuel unearthed them carefully, his heart pounding with dread. To his disbelief, the remains belonged to several coyotes, their skeletons intact but bearing marks of unnatural injury. Puzzled, Samuel examined the scene more thoroughly, eventually discovering a series of traps hidden around the perimeter of the ranch. These weren't ordinary traps designed to catch animals. They were sophisticated mechanisms capable of causing significant harm. Unbelievable realization dawned on Samuel as he pieced together the puzzle. The real reason behind the fence cutting hadn't been Eleanor's need for water. It had been someone else entirely. Someone using the guise of desperation to mask their true intentions. Someone seeking to eliminate competition for control of the land. And that someone was closer than Samuel ever imagined. The climax unfolded under the starlit heavens, the vast expanse of the desert stretching endlessly before them. Confrontations were made, truths laid bare, and alliances tested. In the end, justice prevailed, but not without cost. The ranch stood as a symbol of resilience, its fences mended not just physically, but spiritually, reflecting the unity born from adversity. Thus ended the tale of Samuel Whitmore and the mysterious fence cutter, a story whispered among those who dared to venture into the Wild West. A reminder that sometimes the greatest battles are fought not with guns, but with hearts willing to forgive and hands ready to rebuild. The storm had passed, leaving the desert air crisp and clean, though the tension among the ranch hands lingered like an unspoken secret. Samuel Whitmore stood atop a small rise overlooking his land, the faint light of dawn painting the horizon in shades of gold and crimson. He held the reins of his horse loosely, his mind preoccupied with the events of the past few weeks. The mystery of the fence cutting had deepened, twisting into something far more sinister than he had originally anticipated. As Samuel pondered the situation, his thoughts turned to the traps he had discovered. They were not the work of a novice. Each one was meticulously crafted, designed to incapacitate rather than kill. This suggested that whoever was behind the scheme possessed both skill and intent. But why? What purpose could such actions serve beyond mere sabotage? His musings were interrupted by the sound of hooves approaching from behind. Turning, Samuel saw Eleanor riding toward him, her face etched with concern. She dismounted gracefully, her movements practiced and deliberate. "Samuel," she began, her voice tinged with urgency, "I think we need to talk." Samuel nodded, gesturing for her to join him on the rise. Together, they gazed out over the sprawling expanse of land, the silence between them heavy with unspoken questions. Finally, Eleanor spoke. "I've been thinking about what you found, the bones, the traps, and it doesn't add up. If someone is trying to drive you off your land, why go to such lengths? Why not just attack outright?" Samuel rubbed his chin thoughtfully, his eyes narrowing as he considered her words. "You're right," he admitted reluctantly. "This feels calculated, like they're waiting for something." Eleanor's brow furrowed. Waiting for what? Before Samuel could respond, a distant shout echoed across the plains. Both turned their heads toward the source of the noise, spotting one of the ranch hands waving frantically from the direction of the corral. Without hesitation, Samuel leapt onto his horse, urging it into a gallop, with Eleanor close behind. When they arrived at corral, chaos greeted them. Several of the cattle were restless, pacing nervously along the fence line. One of the younger ranch hands, a boy named Jake, pointed toward the far corner of the enclosure. "There!" he cried, his voice trembling. "Look!" Following his gaze, Samuel and Eleanor spotted another trap, partially buried in the dirt, its metal teeth glinting menacingly in the morning light. But this wasn't the only discovery. Nearby, half buried in the soil, lay an old map rolled tightly and secured with a piece of twine. Curiosity piqued. Samuel dismounted and retrieved the map, unfurling it carefully. The parchment was yellow with age, its edges frayed, but the markings upon it were clear, a detailed layout of surrounding area, including landmarks unfamiliar to Samuel. "What is this?" Eleanor asked, leaning in for a closer look. "I don't know," Samuel replied, his voice low and measured, "but it's definitely not mine." Hours later, back at the ranch house, Samuel spread the map out on the kitchen table, examining it alongside Eleanor and the other ranch hands. The document revealed a network of hidden trails and marked locations scattered throughout the region, some leading deep into the mountains, others pointing toward forgotten ruins long abandoned by settlers. Among these markings was a peculiar symbol, a crescent moon encircled by jagged lines, that appeared repeatedly throughout the map. "Do any of you recognize this?" Samuel asked, tapping the symbol with his finger. The group exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, an older man named Hank spoke up. "That mark," he began hesitantly. "I've seen it before. Back when I was a kid, my grandpa used to tell stories about a group of people who lived out here before the ranches. They called themselves Children of the Night." "Children of the Night?" Eleanor repeated, her curiosity piqued. Hank nodded solemnly. "They were a secretive bunch, always moving under cover of darkness. Some say they worshiped the moon. Others claim they were just trying to survive in a world that didn't want them around. Either way, they vanished after a big fire destroyed their main camp years ago. No one's seen hide nor hair of them since." Samuel frowned, connecting the dots in his mind. The lack of evidence during the fence-cutting incidents, the precision of the traps, the reliance on moonless nights, it all fit. But if this group truly existed, what did they want now? "We need to find out more," Samuel declared, rolling up the map and tucking it into his saddlebag. "And we need to do it fast." Night fell swiftly, the stars emerging like diamonds scattered across the velvet sky. Armed with lanterns and determination, Samuel, Eleanor, and a trusted handful of ranch hands ventured into the wilderness, following the trails indicated on the map. Their journey took them through dense thickets, across babbling streams, and into the shadowy embrace of towering pine forests. Each step brought them deeper into territory unknown, the air growing colder and heavier with each passing mile. It was well after midnight when they stumbled upon the first sign of habitation, an ancient stone altar nestled beneath a canopy of trees, its surface covered in strange carvings. The crescent moon symbol appeared prominently among them, confirming their suspicions. As they examined the site, a chilling howl pierced the night, sending shivers down their spines. "Stay close," Samuel warned, raising his rifle cautiously. Moments later, figures emerged from the darkness. Men and women cloaked in dark robes, their faces obscured by hoods. They moved silently, almost ghost-like, forming a circle around the intruders. At the center stood a tall figure, their presence commanding and authoritative. "You shouldn't have come here," the leader intoned, their voice resonant and calm, yet laced with menace. "Who are you?" Samuel demanded, his grip tightening on his weapon. "We are the keepers of the balance," the figure replied, stepping forward slightly. "Guardians of secrets long buried, stewards of the land you now call yours." Eleanor stepped forward, her courage surprising even herself. "What do you mean by balance? And why have you been cutting fences on Samuel's property?" The leader tilted their head, studying her with piercing intensity. "Your ranch sits upon sacred ground, a place once protected by our ancestors. The water, the earth, the very air you breathe, all belong to us. By claiming it as your own, you disrupt the harmony we strive to maintain." Samuel felt a surge of anger rising within him. "So you cut my fences and set traps because you feel entitled? That's no way to solve a disagreement." The leader raised a hand, silencing any further outburst. "Perhaps not, but we also seek to protect something greater than ourselves, something buried beneath your land, something that must remain undisturbed." At this revelation, Samuel's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" The leader hesitated, then lowered their hood, revealing a face lined with wisdom and sorrow, an artifact of immense power left behind by those who came before. If awakened, it could unleash forces beyond comprehension. For generations, we have ensured its slumber, but now, with the arrival of modern settlers, the balance has shifted. Understanding dawned on Samuel. The keepers weren't merely saboteurs. They were protectors, driven by a mission they believed sacred. Yet, their methods were extreme, putting innocent lives at risk. "There has to be another way," Eleanor interjected, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We can work together, share the land without causing harm." The leader regarded her thoughtfully, then turned to Samuel. "Can you guarantee the artifact will remain untouched?" Samuel hesitated, weighing his options. "If you show me where it is, I'll make sure nothing happens to it. My word on it." After a long pause, the leader extended a hand, palm upward. "Then let us begin anew. Together, we may yet restore the balance." With this fragile truce established, the stage was set for a new chapter in the history of the Wild West, one where understanding triumphed over conflict and cooperation replaced confrontation. Little did they know, however, that the true test of their resolve was still to come. The following days unfolded with an uneasy calm, the tension between Samuel Whitmore and the keepers of the balance hanging in the air like a storm cloud waiting to unleash its fury. Samuel had agreed to protect the artifact buried beneath his land, but trust was a fragile thing, especially when built on secrets and hidden truths. The keepers, though wary, seemed willing to cooperate. Their leader, a woman named Seraphina, insisting that they needed time to verify Samuel's intentions before fully revealing their plans. Back at the ranch, Samuel gathered his closest allies, Eleanor, whose sharp mind and compassionate heart had proven invaluable, Hank, the seasoned old-timer whose knowledge of the region's history was unmatched, and Jake, the young ranch hand whose keen eyes often spotted details others missed. Together, they devised a strategy to honor their promise while safeguarding the interests of the ranch. "Seraphina says the artifact is buried near the old spring," Eleanor explained. spreading a rough sketch of the area on the kitchen table. But she refuses to give us exact coordinates until we prove ourselves trustworthy. Samuel nodded grimly, which means we're going to have to do some digging of our own. He glanced at Hank. You mentioned ruins out past the eastern ridge. Think they could be connected? Hank stroked his grizzled beard thoughtfully. Could be. Back in my day, there were whispers about ancient structures out there. Temples or shrines, maybe. If the keepers are guarding something so important, it stands to reason they'd choose a place steeped in history. Jake chimed in, his youthful enthusiasm undimmed by the gravity of the situation. I can scout ahead. I know these parts better than most. I used to sneak off hunting rabbits when I was little. Eleanor placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. Be careful, Jake. We don't want to draw attention from the keepers, or worse. With the plan set in motion, the group dispersed, each member tasked with gathering information or preparing for whatever challenges lay ahead. As dusk settled over the desert, casting long shadows across the landscape, Samuel found himself alone once more, standing at the edge of his property where the fence had been repeatedly cut. The moonless night stretched endlessly above him, the stars twinkling faintly as if watching with quiet curiosity. Jake returned 2 days later, breathless and excited. Found something, he exclaimed, bursting into the ranch house without preamble. There's a cave system out near the ruins, big enough to hide a whole army, let alone one artifact. Samuel raised an eyebrow. Cave system, you say? Are you sure? As sure as I can be, Jake replied earnestly. It's tucked away behind a waterfall, almost invisible unless you know what you're looking for. Inside, there are carvings on the walls, just like the ones on the map. This revelation sent a shiver down Samuel's spine. If the caves truly held the artifact, then uncovering its nature might hold the key to resolving the conflict with the keepers. But venturing into such a place would not come without risk. Ancient treasures often came guarded by more than mere traps. They carried curses, legends, and powers beyond comprehension. We'll go tonight, Samuel decided, his tone leaving no room for argument. Just the four of us. No sense alerting the entire ranch to this. Eleanor exchanged a glance with Hank, who nodded solemnly. Lead the way, lad. Hank said to Jake, clapping him on the back. Let's see what mysteries those caves hold. Under cover of darkness, the small party rode toward the eastern ridge, their lanterns extinguished to avoid detection. The air grew cooler as they ventured deeper into the wilderness, the familiar sights of the ranch fading into memory. By the time they reached the ruins, the first hints of dawn began to paint the sky in soft hues of pink and orange. Jake led them to the base of a towering cliffside, where a narrow stream cascaded downward in a shimmering curtain of water. Behind it, partially concealed by moss and vines, was the entrance to the cave system, a gaping maw carved into the rock face. With practiced caution, the group slipped inside, their footsteps echoing softly against the damp stone walls. The interior of the caves was unlike anything Samuel had ever seen. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like jagged teeth, dripping water into pools below that reflected the dim light of their lanterns. Along the walls ran intricate carvings depicting scenes of celestial bodies, rituals, and figures cloaked in robes similar to those worn by the keepers. At the center of the main chamber stood a pedestal, upon which rested a glowing orb encased in crystalline glass. "It's beautiful," Eleanor whispered, her voice filled with awe. "And dangerous," Samuel added, his hand instinctively reaching for his rifle. "We still don't know what this thing does, or why the keepers are so desperate to keep it hidden." Hank stepped forward cautiously, inspecting the pedestal closely. "Look here," he said, pointing to a series of symbols etched into the base. "These match the markings on the map and the altar we found earlier. Whatever this is, it's tied directly to the keeper's beliefs." Before anyone could respond, a low rumble echoed through the cavern, causing the ground beneath their feet to tremble slightly. From the shadows emerged several figures clad in dark robes, their faces illuminated by the eerie glow of the orb. Seraphina stood at their forefront, her expression unreadable. "You've broken your word," she accused, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "We trusted you to respect the boundaries we set." Samuel straightened, meeting her gaze steadily. and you've kept secrets that put innocent lives at risk. This artifact, it affects everyone, not just your people. Don't you think it's time for transparency?" For a moment, neither side moved nor spoke, the tension palpable enough to choke the very air. Then, slowly, Serafina lowered her hood, revealing a face lined with sorrow and determination. "Very well," she said finally. "If you wish to understand, then listen carefully." What followed was a tale both breathtaking and tragic. The story of a civilization long forgotten, whose mastery of the cosmos had brought them great power but ultimately led to their downfall. The artifact, known as the lunar heart, was said to channel the energy of the moon itself, granting its wielder dominion over natural forces. However, its use came at a terrible cost: imbalance in the world, destruction wrought by unchecked ambition. The keepers were founded to ensure the lunar heart remained dormant, Serafina concluded, her voice trembling with emotion. But now, with outsiders encroaching on our lands, we fear the balance will tip once more. Samuel listened intently, processing the weight of her words. When she finished, he turned to his companions, seeking their input. Eleanor spoke first. "Perhaps the solution isn't keeping the artifact hidden forever," she suggested gently. "Maybe it's finding a way to integrate protection into the broader community. After all, unity has always been stronger than division." Serafina regarded Eleanor thoughtfully, then nodded slowly. "Perhaps you are right. But such a path will require sacrifices from us all." As the sun rose higher, casting golden beams into the cavern, the group embarked on a new journey, one of reconciliation and shared responsibility. Though challenges undoubtedly awaited them, they faced the future with hope, knowing that even in the darkest corners of the Wild West, light could still prevail. Little did they know, however, that the greatest trial was yet to come, and it would test their resolve in ways none could have imagined. The days that followed were marked by a cautious optimism, as the unlikely alliance between Samuel Whitmore's ranch and the Keepers of the Balance began to take shape. Serafina, now more open about her people's history and intentions, agreed to work alongside Samuel and his companions to devise a plan that would protect the lunar heart while fostering harmony between their two worlds. The artifact, though ancient and mysterious, was no longer a source of fear, but rather a symbol of unity, a shared responsibility that bridged the gap between settlers and guardians. Eleanor, ever the mediator, proposed holding a meeting at the ranch to introduce the keepers to the other settlers in the area. "If we can show them that the keepers aren't enemies," she argued, "then perhaps they'll be willing to help protect the lunar heart too." Her idea was met with skepticism from some of the ranch hands, who still harbor mistrust toward the secretive group. But Samuel saw the wisdom in her words. "Fear breeds conflict," he said firmly, "but understanding can build bridges. Let's give this a try." Preparations for the meeting took place over the course of a week. Tensions ran high among both groups, with whispers of betrayal and hidden agendas swirling like desert winds. Yet, despite these doubts, the day of the gathering arrived without incident. Under the blazing sun of an early autumn afternoon, settlers from neighboring ranches gathered in the main yard of Samuel's property. They came out of curiosity, suspicion, or simply because they had nothing better to do on such a quiet Saturday. Serafina and several of her followers emerged from the shadows of the surrounding hills, their dark robes contrasting sharply with the bright colors of the settlers' clothing. A hush fell over the crowd as the two groups faced each other, the air thick with unspoken questions and lingering distrust. Samuel stepped forward, his voice carrying across the gathering. "Friends, today we stand at a crossroads. For too long, fear and misunderstanding have driven us apart. But I believe it doesn't have to be this way. The Keepers of the Balance are not our enemies. They are stewards of something far greater than any one of us could ever hope to understand." He gestured toward Serafina, who stepped forward hesitantly, her hood lowered to reveal her serene yet guarded expression. "We have watched over the lunar heart for generations," she began, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "It is a power that must remain undisturbed, lest it bring ruin upon us all. We did not seek conflict with the settlers, but neither will we allow the balance to be shattered." As she spoke, the crowd listened intently, their initial hostility giving way to curiosity and, in some cases, respect. Questions were asked, answers given, and slowly but surely, the barriers between the two groups began to crumble. By the end of the day, tentative agreements had been reached. The settlers would respect the sacred sites where the lunar heart rested, while the keepers would share their knowledge of the land to help ensure its prosperity for all. Yet, as the meeting drew to a close, a shadow loomed large over the newfound peace. In the distance, beyond the eastern ridge, a cloud of dust rose into the sky, a sign that trouble was approaching fast. By nightfall, the source of the disturbance became clear. A band of outlaws, led by a ruthless man named Victor Kane, had set their sights on the ranch. Kane, known throughout the territory for his cunning and cruelty, had heard rumors of the lunar heart and believed it held untold riches. His gang rode hard and fast, intent on seizing the artifact by force if necessary. When word reached Samuel of the impending attack, he wasted no time mobilizing his defenses. With Eleanor's help, he organized the ranch hands into a makeshift militia, arming them with rifles and fortifying perimeter with hastily constructed barricades. Meanwhile, Serafina and her keepers prepared their own form of resistance, ancient rituals designed to protect the lunar heart from falling into the wrong hands. As dawn broke, the sound of hooves thundering across the plains announced the arrival of Kane's gang. 30 men strong, they charged the ranch with reckless abandon, firing shots and shouting threats. The battle that ensued was fierce and chaotic, bullets whizzing past heads and horses rearing wildly in the confusion. At the heart of the chaos stood Samuel, his rifle raised as he directed his forces with calm precision. Beside him, Eleanor tended to the wounded, her hands steady despite the carnage around her. On the outskirts of the fight, the keepers performed their rituals, chanting in unison as glowing symbols appeared in the air, creating barriers that deflected the outlaws' bullets and confused their attacks. Victor Kane, seeing his plans unraveling before him, grew desperate. He spotted Serafina near the entrance to the cave system and charged toward her, determined to claim the lunar heart himself. But Samuel, ever vigilant, intercepted him, the two men engaging in a brutal hand-to-hand struggle. Kane was a formidable opponent, his strength fueled by greed and malice, but Samuel fought with the determination of a man protecting not just his land, but the fragile peace he had worked so hard to achieve. In the end, it was a well-placed blow from Samuel's fist that sent Kane sprawling to the ground unconscious. Seeing their leader defeated, the remaining outlaws retreated, disappearing into horizon as quickly as they had come. With the immediate threat neutralized, the survivors gathered in the aftermath of the battle. Exhaustion hung heavy in the air, mingling with relief and gratitude. Samuel surveyed the damage done to his ranch, his heart heavy with the knowledge that rebuilding would take time and effort. Yet, amidst the destruction, there was also triumph, a testament to what could be accomplished when disparate groups came together for a common cause. Serafina approached him, her face softened by the events of the day. "You have proven yourself worthy, Samuel Whitmore," she said solemnly, "not only as a protector of the land, but as a bridge between worlds. The lunar heart is safe, for now, but remember, the forces that seek to exploit it will never truly cease." Samuel nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "Then we'll be ready," he replied resolutely. Together. And so, the tale of Samuel Whitmore and the lunar heart continued, a saga of courage, cooperation, and the enduring spirit of the Wild West. Though challenges remained ahead, the bonds forged in fire and blood ensured that none would face them alone. Little did they know, however, that the greatest test of their resolve was yet to come, one that would push them to the very limits of their strength and faith.